Hey kids, this is Ive. How you doing? Well, today I want to continue this little miniature series that I've been doing on strange attractors. What are the things that attract me to particular role-playing games? I already talked about the magic of a premise, so today I want to talk about mechanics and system. If you watch my channel for a while, you know that I kind of dig mechanics. And I think that's natural for somebody my age that started playing relatively young because the games we had available to us at that time, they weren't real complete systems for the most part. So we did a lot of house ruling, and they encouraged us to do that. It was right there in the rules a lot of times. Go ahead and do whatever you want, and so we did. And so over time, some of us, myself included, became more and more enamored with those mechanics and different mechanics. And how does this work? And what kind of percentage chance does this create? And what kind of feel does this create? Et cetera, et cetera. And then some of us went on to design games. And I was watching a video that Runeslinger did a while ago, and he's talking to, I believe the guy's name is Jeff Combos, the guy that lead author on Ubiquity and Hollow Earth Expedition, which is the first game to use that system, and then they licensed it to other people. And Jeff's talking about a conversation he had with a friend, and the friend says, "Hey Jeff, you don't collect games, you collect systems." And when I heard that, I smiled in identification because I've become more and more of a collector of systems, not just looking at different games, but also kind of looking at different systems. Sometimes I'll look at a game, and the game itself, the premise isn't doing it for me. It's not really rocking my world, but somebody's talked up something, or I've heard of the system, and I'm like, the system starts rocking my world, or I start to find it interesting. I even like to kind of look at systems that I don't really like that much, just to see why I don't like them, or how does this work anyway. But in my case, a lot of times what happens is maybe a game premise grabs me, and then I have to look at the mechanic and system and see if it passes the acid test. I have to see what they're trying to do, and also, like, do I like this, or is it really annoying me? And I think at some point, we all have a sweet spot. And I talk a lot about that sweet spot being complexity, but there can be some other areas as well. But there's games that I've looked at recently that produce different feels, and it's neat to see like how those systems inform those different feels. Something like Circle of Hands has this really kind of dark, gritty feel, and it's not just a setting. The system kind of enforces that, and it enforces things to be very fast. Things can go very wrong very fast, and it's just very simple D6 mechanics, but you can get a very disadvantageous result. And it's it's a simple system, but it produces that. By the same token, something like the Ubiquity system can produce this really cinematic, uh, experience. And then you've got the whole idea of like bell curve, the die pools producing different kind of feels in some ways than linear die rolls. Both of them are cool. I'm not a fan or disparaging either one. I kind of like them both, but they definitely have different feels to them. So, looking at a game, sometimes it is the system that kind of grabs me in, and I find it such a novel, interesting mechanic that I'm like, geez, let me take a bigger look at that. And I think that kind of happened with me with the Ubiquity games. I got less enamored originally with the premises of the games themselves. And I'm like, oh, that's kind of a cool little system. That's interesting. So that's definitely a case of me getting attracted that way. There's other games that I've looked at where, the system is in the process of passing the acid test or not passing it. And there's some differences. Like I'm looking at Eclipse Phase, great premise. The core mechanic, pretty cool. Little D100 mechanic with some little twist here and there. However, the system itself, because when we're talking about system, we're talking about the whole thing. Is it class based? Is it skill based? How do you improve? How does the whole system affect play? All that kind of junk. How many modifiers are there? What happens with Eclipse Phase is there are a ton of modifiers. It's a very, very complex game. It's right up there with, something like huge involved D20 or I suppose GURPS or just name your complex game. And I'm like, man, this Hackmaster game I'm starting to play on Monday nights. another complex game, but it's right up there with the huge amount of modifiers and situational stuff going on there. So the system itself may not pass the acid test. However, in looking at these games too, I have to be really careful to stop for a second and say, well, geez, what kind of experience are they trying to produce here with the system, with not just the setting, but with the system itself, and is that informing play in some way, or the play experience? And so maybe I should just try to see what their intent is first. I definitely talked about in the past about not wanting to hack games. I want to hack them, but not allowing myself to hack or modify new games, and just see what kind of experiences that produce. However, there are sometimes I look at a game and I say, I like this premise. Maybe I'll use this other system with it and call it a different game. So I think we all have our sweet spot. We all have a place where we kind of gravitate towards in terms of complexity, what the system does, what it produces. I'm definitely a fan of some systems rather that they're not overly simple, but they the task resolution happens relatively fast, and there's not a ton of modifiers. I like things that are you don't have to do a ton of complex mathematical operations. I don't want them to be completely unrealistic, and I understand why so much of that stuff in like a game like Eclipse Phase is put in there. However, there's times when I don't necessarily use this mechanic, but I smiled when I saw the advantage disadvantage mechanic they use in 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons. I'm not saying a huge fan of that mechanic, but I understand why they put it in there. You've got these games that have become relatively complex and full of modifiers and whatnot. But there's a segment of the population that are like, hey, can I just roll a die? Can we call this advantageous or disadvantageous? And so they kind of put that in there, and it seems to be kind of a neat little compromise, And they certainly didn't invent that concept. So, and I think it's probably an attempt to appeal to some other people's sweet spots, if you want my commentary. Not that that matters. But that's it for me. I like, sometimes the system itself draws me in. And I'm like, wow, that's really kind of cool and novel and interesting. Sometimes it's the premise that draws me in, and then I find the system, find the mechanics, and I look at it. I look at something like Broken Rooms, and I'm like, wow, D12 is really cool. And I look at that, and I'm really kind of digging the momentum system. May use it in a different game, may steal it to use it in someplace else. But yeah, I've become a collector of systems. I've become more and more interested in seeing how these things work. Do they produce nonsensical results or not? What kind of feel do they produce? And so I'm enjoying that as well. But definitely, sometimes I just get suckered in by the system itself. And sometimes, I turn around and say, not for me.